Hello and welcome to the Harrison Bridge Show. Today we're discussing how you can create strategic partnerships in energy. And I'm very excited to have Andy Jewis with us today. Andy is the CEO of Pineapple, and they help businesses form partnerships to unlock opportunities related to the energy transition. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, Lee. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I'd also like to introduce the delightful Kirsty Ames, who's emceeing the show. Hello, Kirsty.
Hello, Lee. How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Good. I'm excited about today's show, and I say the same thing every time. If, as we go through, you have any questions for Lee or for Andy, or you've got any pushback, we like a little bit of argy-bargy, then feel free to pop them in the comments, and I'll bring them to the panel. Don't leave me lonely over there. It's very fun. But I think it's time to get started, Lee.
I think it is. Thank you, Kirsty. So, first question, Andy, would you mind telling me how you came to be focused in this area?
I never know if I'm focused, to be honest, Lee, but I try my best. I guess I spent the last 20 odd years working in climate and energy for a large proportion of that time. I was working at Schneider Electric prior to this, which is a great company, truly sort of focused on the transition and on climate. And in that sort of time, understood, the magnitude of the challenges that we face in climate and energy transition. It's really is a systems problem. It's a huge challenge. And then B, the role that large organizations have to be able to scale this transition, but then also the role that their entire ecosystems have to scale these transitions. And these problems are so big that it really requires more than one organization collaborating together in order to solve the challenge that we face at the pace that we need to do it. So that sort of piqued my curiosity, I guess, and focused is again probably too much of a targeted word, but careering through partnerships, I would say, is probably a more apt description.
And I'm going to blow your trumpet for you, Andy, because I've known you for quite a long time, and your career has been very impressive because you set up a carbon sustainability business. It was Encore, wasn't it? That you then sold to McKinnon and Clark. You then helped McKinnon and Clark sell to Schneider Electric, and then held several senior roles in Schneider Electric, presumably where you had quite a lot of experience of partnerships with big corporates, and truly got to understand the systems challenge here. So on that, in terms of partnerships, what do partnerships solve, and why are they needed, would you say?
Right, it's just a difficult question. Sometimes they don't solve anything. Sometimes they create more problems, I guess, and that's part of the challenge. But I guess, sort of going back to that first point, really, if you look at something, as complex as climate change, tackling climate change issues, if you look at something as complex, even as like renewable energy transition, what that requires is a huge pull from multiple different organizations. I'm thinking about one of our projects or businesses, Pineapple Homes. Some people call me SpongeBob SquarePants. Lives in a pineapple under the sea. But the Pineapple Homes is a business that's focused on a really difficult challenge, which is net zero housing transition. I think we have 28 million homes to transition in the UK to net zero by 2050, and we're nowhere really in terms of that journey. And so we set up Pineapple Homes as a scale consortium between British Gas and NatWest Bank, a bunch of scale-up organisations, in order to accelerate the transition of social housing, where we're working to retrofit tens of thousands of homes across the UK over the coming years. And what these as an example of why partnerships were needed in that is look at that system. You've got a broken financing structure. It's not very easy for me to finance the retrofit of my home. You've got a broken sort of supply chain and fragmented technology. You know, what sort of stuff do I stick into my house? And you've got a broken delivery mechanism as well. So it's sort of, you know, do I call the plumber, the electrician? I can't get any of these people to my house, even if my boiler's broken. So let alone managing this. And so, you know, our sort of philosophy is that, you know, in order to overcome that at the scale of 28 million homes, you really need to build that, you know, fix that really messy supply side of the equation and build scale finance, scale technology, and scale delivery solutions. So I can kind of call someone up and say, I want a net zero home, please. And they say, yeah, we'll be around on Wednesday and it's going to cost you $10.99 a month, or, you know, whatever. So kind of getting to that place is where we need to do all the way across the ecosystem. And it can't be done by a single organization. It requires a whole kind of value chain to come together around a business model.
Got it. Okay. So to summarize, energy transition, super complex. We're nowhere near it now. It requires multiple organizations. We need to go faster. And the three kind of components of that is financing. We need to fix the supply chain and, you know, scale delivery. And I think you've done some work of Energy Systems Catapult, and they do a lot around kind of systems thinking as well. What do you think are the biggest barriers companies face when kind of forming these sorts of partnerships, Andy?
I guess it's, you know, these things are really difficult, really, really difficult. And I can't stress, you know, we just went through an amazing and scary piece of work with an organization called the Partner Initiative. They were behind actually creating SDG 17, and they do lots of studies into these partnerships. I remember having the first interview with those guys, and, you know, I've got this really robust framework for, you know, how you do sort of partnership health checks and all that sort of stuff. And I think my opening thing was like, I don't know if we've got this right. You know, it's a really difficult, challenging thing, and it's such a human thing. You know, what it requires is leadership from people at all levels in the organization, in order to kind of, the different organizations that are collaborating, in order to sort of create this shared vision for what the future outcome could be. You know, we can create billions of pounds worth of market opportunity by retrofitting homes. It requires those people to kind of align around that and align, you know, sort of share their objectives, which change over time. And it requires this sort of internal resilience, you know, to look beyond maybe, you know, my KPI is to grow the business by X in the next 12 months, and, you know, really look across multiple years, which, you know, generally requires kind of CEO level or very senior sponsorship. So you're having to sort of navigate huge amounts of complexity within your own large, complex organization, lots of different silos, and then somehow kind of bring that together with other organizations. You know, it's very complex, and it really takes trust and people to kind of come together to do that. So sort of mindset and a human thing, I guess, is the overriding thing. And then clearly there's lots of other things that are important, like fair contracts and all those sorts of things. But, yeah.
And are there sometimes perhaps conflict there in terms of the goals being aligned and objectives?
Yeah, even internally, even within teams, you know, within the same organization, you know, it's lots of competing objectives, not lots of competing challenges, really. So, you know, I find it hard enough to organize my household. I don't organize my household at all, but you know, just kind of doing the shopping for me is hard enough. So you know, I think you're trying to kind of pull together yourself and your own objectives and then align that with others. It's really challenging.
So tell me more about that in terms of the other challenges around what else makes it difficult to make partnerships work. So you've got to align the goals, the objectives. Anything else you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think we kind of break it down into three areas, really. So one is kind of making sure that you get the right buy-in, and that's sort of that can span different aspects of your own organization. So, does my boss support me to do this? Are my team happy that I'm doing this? Is this in line with the overall direction of the organization? What's the opportunity cost of investing in this? What's going to suffer, and am I okay with that? And is everybody okay with that? So I think kind of getting that buy-in internally, and then looking outwardly and sort of thinking about how you get buy-in is a big sort of challenges that perpetually organizations and people within organizations are having to overcome. The other side is then behaviors, and again, that's that point, like as these things come out of line and you get into these challenging spaces, that changes behavior, and behaviors change over time. So if people are under stress, if the company's missing its sort of end of year margins, everything's on a cost restriction, over a multi-year partnership, these things all kind of shift behavior. So I think having that sort of trust and transparency and ability to sort of collaborate and understand, as well as kind of take this longer term perspective around behavior is really important. And it's, we really, with all the partnerships we work on, you really build this sort of very deep level of trust across these different people, and that sort of wouldn't work if you didn't have the right kind of behaviors, and you weren't sort of conscious enough to focus on those behaviors. And then third one is a bit more transactional. It's like benefits. It's like, well, I need to grow my business by 40 million this year or 100 million this year. Somebody else wanted to grow their business by 5 million, and it's sort of like, okay, well, how do we make that work? How do you get that shared ambition to align and be meaningful for everybody? And then how do you get the benefits to come through? Again, when you're doing a deal, some of these housing commitments can be into the kind of billions of pounds over multiple years. Where does the risk versus reward sit with different organizations as they're going through that? How do you kind of balance that and get those kind of benefits aligned effectively? And that's again a kind of a big challenge, but if you can make that sort of work, then that's great.
A lot to consider. So getting the right buy-in, not just internally but externally, understanding the behaviours of an organisation, which changes over time, and then the trust and that ongoing collaboration, and then making sure that you're aligning the commercial benefits and the objectives of both organisations. So not easy.
Do you want a job, Lee? Because you're summarising this much better than I feel like I do like 5 minutes of waffle.
And then really as well.
Let's have a separate chat after the show, Andy. Let's have a separate chat with Sideline Harrison Bridge Partnership Ventures.
Exactly.
Kirsty, have we got any questions in the chat?
We haven't so far. I think Andy's answering all of the questions that you're giving him in a really lovely way. So far we're doing well. But if you do have any questions or any pushback for Andy or Lee, do feel free to pop them in the chat.
Thank you. What would be your practical tips? And if you give me 3 practical tips, Andy, for setting up for success with a partnership, what would those be?
Yeah. So I guess I can kind of build on those other 3 things, just so it doesn't confuse people more than we need to. So I guess the thing on the kind of buy-in is sort of look for the opportunity, really. So what does the opportunity look like for me, for my organisation, and is the investment in this partnership worth the effort, effectively? So how do I sort of manage to sell the opportunity to myself and then sell the opportunity internally, and what are we going to get out of this? So I think it's kind of focus on the opportunity, and then focus on the stakeholders that you might need to kind of surround yourself with and bring along with you, which in the spirit of kind of the recruitment world, I guess, is really a leadership challenge for people. I then think it's then the sort of second piece, I guess, is around behaviours again. So it's sort of, I guess it's like a combination of being kind of very self-aware and sort of introspective on, what are the behaviors that I need to exhibit or I am exhibiting in order to make this move and make this work. And what behaviors do I need to see for others or from others, or how do I need to engage and sort of bring the right culture to the partnership that we're trying to create, and how do we kind of do that? And that's, as I said, sort of very much a mindset thing, very much an ambition thing as well. So it really is about believing we can deliver on these things, because of all of the partnerships that we're doing, pretty much these things haven't been done in the past. So we're kind of breaking new ground and really being quite ambitious about taking on new parts of the market. And then the benefits is like infinitely complicated, but to start very simple, I would say, which is, how does this help us to achieve our goal, or how does this help us to achieve a longer term goal that maybe the organization doesn't have sight of? If the future of the organization exists as being a leader in the climate transition, and you're maybe not doing that, at an organizational level, how do we create that kind of benefit structure that enables us to sort of make that strategic shift to be a kind of major player in transition, or a leader in the space that we know we need to be a leader on in the future? So I think very long-winded tips. I'm sure you can summarize them really well, Lee, much better than I have, no pressure. But I think that they'd be my kind of three areas of focus to overcome them, just to elaborate a bit more on what I said.
Would it be good advice to perhaps start with the end in mind from the partnership, and then you kind of work backwards?
Yeah, and sometimes, or most of the time, that's a hugely ambitious goal, right? And actually takes that leadership. I remember we were engaging with NatWest's CEO around this, and the ambition for social housing is that this is a £100 billion market. We know we want to be a major player in it. How do we accelerate? Oh, they are a major player in it. How do we accelerate that commitment to climate, support our customers, support the most vulnerable in society by doing this? How do we go faster? And I think it's sort of having that. The goal might not need to be sort of really concrete. It could be more kind of aspirational, but it needs to quite often be almost sort of 10x from where you are at the moment. How do we sort of solve these huge problems in order to sort of force you into that need for partnering? Because that can't, you can't do that if you're just a bank or you're just an energy company. You've got to kind of do that as an industry and
Yes.
lead the way for the industry.
Got it. And things are ever changing, and we're dealing with quite a lot of ambiguity here. So, starting with the end in mind, you might have a rough idea, but things are going to change along the way. Are there any kind of partnerships you can think of, either in your career or others, that you think have worked really well? And if so, why do you think they've worked well?
Yeah, we did this. It was sort of surprising, not surprising, but we released let's get the name of it right, a thought paper, position paper or something, which was sort of, we'd spent a few years kind of careering around this partnerships area, trying to make them work. Part of that piece of work that I mentioned earlier, where we were kind of put under the microscope to look at how we actually do these things, was to try and help us kind of codify how these partnership structures work for the good of the world, basically, so we can start to kind of share this so other people can adopt and take lessons from them. And the start for that was kind of trying to bottle it in this paper, and doing quite a bit more work around that going forwards. And one of the things we did, so it's a very long-winded answer to your question, but one of the things that we did was did a sort of search the world for with a bit of support from the WBCSD for partnerships like this, and we couldn't find many sort of multilateral partnerships. There's lots of kind of bilateral things. There's lots of emerging partnerships that are pretty cool, and I think sort of merge into this space. One of the guys that we collaborate with is the First Movers Coalition. So what they're about doing is effectively bringing procurement organizations together in order to build demand for things like electric vehicles, renewables. So they place future orders for volumes of these things, which then, sort of overcomes this chicken and egg side of the equation, which is like, everybody's sat on their hands going, well, I'm not going to buy this technology until the price comes down or until it's more reliable, and then other people are kind of sat there going, well, we're not going to build it if you're not going to promise to buy it. So you kind of have this thing, and I think that's a really good example of a partnership structure where they're sort of overcoming that demand side of the equation. And again, like with the housing, I refer to the housing work because I'm just come out of a meeting on it, but it's sort of fresh in my mind. Again, the cornerstone for that is actually a CEO of one of our major partners in that, Places for People, has sort of made a commitment to say, okay, well, we've got 70,000 homes that need to be retrofit. We'll collaborate with you to understand how we can do this at scale, and then we'll take the 3-odd million homes that sit within the overall social housing industry with us, and we'll go out and engage with the market and try and help you to kind of tip the balance of that scale. So you need that kind of demand side piece. But I think where it's sort of lacking is an area that we're working towards, is sort of bringing those ecosystem-based supply side solutions together, because it's fine to have an order for 50,000 electric vehicles or 100,000 electric vehicles, but if the policy conditions aren't correct, if the infrastructure is not there, it's famous one is electric vehicles. If the infrastructure is not there to kind of support it, you can't deliver it, it can't work. So and it's all this sort of chicken and egg game that the demand needs to be there, the supply needs to be there, and you've got to build it. But I think electric vehicles is a great example of a space that we can see accelerating again. What's happened in sort of solar, you see, and renewables, you can see that sort of curve going sort of exponential, and that needs to happen all over the place in multiple areas, and that's where we think that sort of these scale partnerships for supply are a little bit lacking. One great one actually in the renewable energy space as well, not to plug my old organization too much, but I think it's great, some of the work that Schneider are doing this sort of on these sort of cross-sector renewables. So they did a big load of work with the pharmaceutical sector on a program called Energize, which is sort of bringing together and aggregating the supply chain of organizations so they can get access to scale renewable energy and rapidly decarbonize. And so I think we need more and more of that sort of stuff. But the more kind of complex the problem you're trying to solve, the more organizations you need to involve in making that work. And the demand's there for the supply as well. The banks are way overcommitted on the amount of money and capital that they can deploy to the green agenda. They're just looking around for these sort of scale programs to invest in.
Brilliant. I think you said you did a position paper on this. So if someone wanted to access that, how would they go about getting that?
Well, it can get in touch with me if there's a way to get in touch with me, and we can share it.
The best way we normally recommend is your comment with your LinkedIn profile will be, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, it will be in the comments below, or if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll make sure it's in a pinned comment on YouTube and in the description for you. So we'll put Andy's LinkedIn profile, and if you just connect with you and kind of say that you want the position paper and you came from kind of Lee's show, then you'll know exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool.
Okay. All right, Lee, do you want to get on to our final question before we round up?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a difficult question, Andy. I don't know if you can answer this one. How do you see strategic partnerships evolving in the next 5 years, especially with the advancements in energy tech and AI?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of cool things around the sort of tech AI thing. So I think one thing is, increasingly sort of clean technologies are going through that kind of cost curve process. So you get to these sort of, we have another business that works in commercial real estate retrofitting, and again, that's a sort of scale partnership between a number of organizations, and sort of you get to look at how you rapidly decarbonize. We were talking, we're planning through earlier this morning a decarbonisation program. I think 180 factories around the world, and it's sort of like, how do you do that at scale? And so you can kind of see the impact of the cost curve on these technologies. Solar, battery, demand side management stuff. It kind of makes loads of sense in terms of the returns, in terms of the way it can be financed, in terms of the kind of the understanding of the finance community for how these things work. So you kind of, once people get familiar, you can kind of rapidly scale. And I think and hope that more and more of these sorts of technologies will become known and understood as we continue to advance. And then the role of AI is, it's really emerging at the moment, isn't it? But I think it's, there's a project that we're working on or working alongside that's sort of looking at AI as a tool for managing logistics in the food system. So looking to identify efficiencies, and you can see the kind of the exponential impact that can have when you look across a value chain. So you've got like everything from your supermarkets through to your farms. When you look across that food value chain, and the impact that AI can have at sort of looking at the interconnectedness of all of these different things, where there are maybe opportunities for sustainability gains, where there's a sort of business case payback for doing that as well, is quite fascinating. So I think, we'll see AI and technology playing a role in solving, I think, some of those complex interrelationships, or however you describe them, between different organizations, which are foundational to these sort of collaborative business models that require kind of partnerships to power them. And then, I think as that continues to, I'm excited to see how that continues to evolve. And again, we were looking at, but we have another thing that we're doing is Pineapple Farms. We're very inventive with our naming, I have to say. We need a branding revisit. But Pineapple Farms, it's easy to remember. We're looking at kind of nature loss and the interconnectedness of nature using AI technology and models. Because a big challenge, and you have, like in the UK, we're kind of a leader with these sorts of like biodiversity net gain, and you've got corporates and finance sort of swimming around that space. How do we invest or support biodiversity? But that topic's so interconnected and complex, and it's not, I think you can see what's happened in the carbon markets, where we kind of oversimplified some of that. And I think sort of having a look at these new nature markets and protecting nature and the sort of more restorative models there, maybe AI can kind of help with that.
Okay.
Good answer to a tough question. Thank you, Andy.
I think that was an excellent answer to a very tough question. So thank you. But we are unfortunately coming towards the end of the show now. So in a second, I'm going to summarize, and then we're going to ask Andy about his kind of top tip. But before then, Lee, next year, we've got a really exciting couple of shows coming up, but we're not going to spoil it now, but we've got a really exciting program next year, don't we?
We certainly do. We certainly do. All in my head at the moment.
We're very excited about it. Okay. So, Andy, if I may summarize the knowledge bombs that you've dropped on us. So I'm going to try my hardest. So you have to be gentle with me. Okay. So essentially, a big part of the problem is it's takes multiple organizations to solve these sort of problems that we're talking about. And within that, those organizations obviously are complex. So you take into financing gaps, you add in supply chain and technology, you add in the kind of delivery of that. It all kind of comes into this big tangled knot of problems. And so within that as well, you have everybody's individual organization has individual people who have aims and things, and teams who have aims, and then the companies who have aims, what they want to achieve. And then you have that in multiple organizations. It gets a bit messy, I think, is probably the answer. So you said that the way to kind of get around this is to think of what I believe you referred to as the 3 Bs, which I quite liked. So number 1 is buy-in. Look for the opportunity for all of these stakeholders. Figure out for the individual, for the teams, for the organization, is this worth the effort? What kind of benefits are they going to get from it themselves? Are they going to be the leaders in technology and expand the horizons of this? It's not just the next 12 months, like so often we get caught up in. We're talking kind of 10 times that. We're talking in the next 10 years. For behavior, we need to be quite self-aware and introspective. We need to think about what behaviors do we need in order to create the right culture that is going to help us achieve this aim. It's about mindset, ambition, and believing that you can, in fact, deliver it and have that as a forefront of that. And then the benefits, start simple, help to achieve your goals, or perhaps, again, more importantly, help your company or your organization to achieve goals that they perhaps hadn't even considered, that are outside of their scope of focus. Then when it comes to the future, there's a lot of really exciting things, hopefully, because things are the kind of growth curve, I think you referred to it as. Tech becomes more well-known, so it becomes kind of more efficient, more simple, more easy to use. And then obviously you've got AI coming in there as well and taking in all sorts of imaginable new places that we could lead to. How did I do for a summary, Andy?
Amazing. Do you want a job as well? You're both nailing this.
We are the summary podcast. That's what we are. Okay, so Andy, as we mentioned, if anybody wants that position paper, best thing to do is to connect with you on LinkedIn and ask for it. And again, I will put in the comments below, and on the YouTube, I'll put in the description as well, your LinkedIn profile for them to find that. So, Lee, I think what's left of this is for you to kind of round off this season of the show.
Thank you, Kirsty. Andy, thank you very much for a very informative discussion. I really enjoyed talking to you on this topic. I think you've offered a lot of value to our audience in this area. Kirsty, thank you too. And finally, thank you to our viewers. Have a lovely Christmas, and we will see you in the new year.